Have you been wondering if it's time to quit therapy? Maybe you've been going for a while now. You're realizing some of the benefits. You're feeling more emotionally secure, less anxious, less snappy. You have a better work life balance, and in general, are enjoying a higher level of self confidence. Your relationships are improving, including the one with yourself. These are all great indicators that your emotional resilience is improving, and yet you also know how important it is to prioritize your mental health, and you're not sure you're ready to give up on that kind of regular meeting with the therapist. I had the same questions when I was in therapy, and in this video, we'll cover 5 indications that it might be time to move on from therapy, including one that may mean it's a bit premature. And we'll also talk about what you might do next. Now, before we dive into the 5 indications that it might be time to move on from therapy, I do want to let you know that I am not anti therapy by any means. I have used the services of such professionals in my past and even recently. My husband and I hired a couples counselor to get through an issue that we were kind of stuck on ourselves and couldn't seem to move past. So I am definitely aware of and committed to using mental health experts and professionals when necessary. And also, I've been in therapy and realized that I was sort of done looking at the past and learning what I could from mining that and ready to move on in the future. And so I want to share these indications if that kind of sounds like you and you might be in that position of when it might be time to call it quits with your therapist. And the first indication that you might be ready to leave therapy is kind of obvious. You've accomplished your goals. Maybe you wanted to find a therapist to help with like a certain OCD behavior or to improve a particular relationship in your life, like with your parents or your spouse. And so you sought out the professional services of a therapist in that situation, and you feel like you've reached that result. Your OCD behavior is under control, or you have improved that relationship. And so going to the therapist at this point, you feel like has accomplished what you set out to accomplish. You feel that you're at a better place and that maybe going to the therapist isn't actually providing anything new as far as those goals are considered. So, the second indication that you may be ready to move on from therapy is that you've reached a natural plateau. And this is natural. This isn't to say that you or your therapist need to do anything different, but you might find yourself retreading the same topics, you're telling the same stories, and you're really not getting any new insight from that, maybe those original epiphany moments. And I know for like my husband and I, and when we were recently in couples counseling, it went from things coming up during the week and us saying to each other, hey, maybe this is something we can talk about in therapy, to, do we have anything to talk about in therapy? And that to us indicated it was a good time to talk to our therapist and see if she agreed that we were at a good place to kind of come to a natural stopping point. Again, there isn't any magic number of months or time that this would look like. But if you find yourself kind of racking your brain looking for something to bring up, or even maybe just a little bit bored and checking the time, that may indicate to you and your therapist that it's time to consider moving on. A third reason you might decide to leave therapy might just be a particular therapist. It may happen that you and your therapist have just not been a good fit. This hopefully happens early on so that you're not investing money in somebody that isn't, feels right to you. But for instance, I have a sister who's seen a therapist that she at first hit off really well. It turns out that this person had been in the same field that my sister's in. And so when she first met her, she felt like she really resonated with her, that the person had a lot of identifying factors, knew the kind of thing that my sister was concerned about. But within a couple sessions, she realized that they just weren't quite gelling. She felt like the therapist, for instance, was talking more about the kind of theories she was going to be using in therapy versus asking questions. And if you're not able to talk to your therapist and see or make pivots in your therapy, certainly you want to consider that. There's lots of therapists out there, and there's nothing wrong if you're not having a good fit. But that would definitely be an indication that you might want to leave therapy, or at least that therapist. The fourth way you may realize that you're ready to graduate from therapy is if the couple of minutes of small talk in your sessions with the therapist have turned into 15 or 20 minutes of chattiness. And it's understandable when this happens because you may have seen this person for several months, a couple of years in my case, and realize that this is someone you trust, you've shared intimacies with them, and you may know a little bit about their life. If they're a good therapist, they've probably shared parts of their transformation with you. But what that can indicate to you as someone who's trying to decide whether to keep going to therapy is if that's taking up a lot of your session, it may be a better use of your time and your money to feel that there's a natural ending to this, professional relationship, and it might be time to move on. I know that when I found that with the therapist that I saw, I brought it up with him. We had a kind of laugh about it. We both realized it, and we formed an exit plan at that point. And the final reason you might realize that it's time to move on from therapy is if you start purposely missing your sessions. You start canceling them, or you let more weeks go between them and you don't make them up. And check in with yourself here, because I would say if you're doing this because you don't feel like you have anything to talk about, or you feel like you're retreading the same material, then yeah, that's probably indicating it's time to talk to your therapist about an exit plan. However, and this is the caveat I mentioned at the beginning, if you find it's because you're avoiding a topic that's making you uncomfortable, that's when a good therapist will keep pressing you to come and explore that a little bit more. I remember in my younger years when I went to a therapist one day that I'd had for a few months, and I said, you know what? I feel like I'm done here. I feel like I have tackled the topic I came in for, and I'm good. And the therapist was very sweet, and he just looked at me and said, I don't think we are. And it took me aback for a minute because, I was like, what are you talking about? I'm the customer here, aren't I? But when I sat on it for a while, I realized he was right. He explained, look, we're getting close to something that I think is going to really help you in identifying this pattern that you came originally to see me. So would you commit to X amount more sessions before you give up on it? And that seemed fair to me. And I did, and he was right. We did end up getting to a place where I could identify some things in my past that were contributing to something, and I'm really glad that I stayed in that session. So if any of these 5 indications resonated with you, when I got to that point with my various therapists, I realized that while I was done mining the past to figure out maybe why I was doing the things I did and to get those insights, I was ready to move on and start thinking about the future and the present. And I actually found coaching to be a really nice segue into that goal reaching. And if that is something that might interest you, be sure to watch this next video where I talk about coaching as a next natural step in your mental health journey.